All right. Hi, everybody. Welcome. My name is Cheryl Baun. I am the Executive Director of the Arts Council of Rockland. And very briefly, if you're not familiar with our organization, our mission is to advance and support the arts, artists, and the arts, culture, and the role of artists in Rockland County. And we have a lot of activity going on at our organization these days. Um, and I hope you'll visit our website to find out what some of those things are. But in general, we do a lot of professional development workshops. We help support our member artists through things like exhibitions and different opportunities to share their work and promote their work. Things like artist spotlights. We have a new series where we're doing Instagram live interviews with different artists. So, and we also give some grants. So those are some of the key things that we do, but it feels like we do a lot more. So hopefully you'll check out our website, and there are a lot of great benefits like those if you become a member. So that's what I'll say about the Arts Council of Rockland. Welcome tonight to this discussion. This event is a collaboration with our friends over at Rivertown Film. So Matthew, I'm looking right at you. Hello. Thank you so much for partnering with us to make this event happen. And I just want to say up front that if you haven't viewed the film, Museum Town, you can certainly still follow along. I think there are a lot of themes in the film that'll carry over probably into a lot of things that if you're on this in this meeting, you probably think about them regularly. But I definitely encourage you to see the film. I believe it is still streaming via Rivertown Film through tomorrow. Is that correct? Okay, great. So definitely go there and watch the film if you haven't. And just like one sentence about the film, if you haven't seen it, Museum Town basically follows the story, a decades-long journey about the evolution of how Mass MoCA came to be and the impact of this arts institution on the community where it is located in North Adams, Massachusetts. So I think that's kind of all you really need to know in order to follow along tonight. I guess just how we're going to structure this discussion. I am going to probably ask one or two questions to each of our panelists, and we'll start out that way. Just some general discussion questions. And if you don't mind, I'd ask that if you have questions, if you could hold them till the end, because we are going to definitely set aside some time to make sure that everybody gets to be a part of the discussion. One of the things that I also want to say about, what we're going to do tonight, we posed this question, which is sort of a big question, right? How can art transform communities? It is a really big question. And I'm pretty sure that the conversation that we're going to have tonight is just like really going to just scratch the surface of the many different directions that conversation can go. But I think we felt, those of us, who are part of this panel tonight, that it's better to start that conversation. And if we have to have another conversation, and hopefully we will, then we will. The film really does focus a lot about, the development of Mass MoCA, that impact on the local community, a lot of it having to do with economic development. But we're not going to talk so much about the details of the film. We'll reference it throughout. But really the film is more like a catalyst for us to start this conversation. And we thought a great way to do that would be to start with an institution here in Rockland County that I think probably best parallels something like Mass MoCA, which is the Garner Arts Center. So, and you'll have to excuse me because I'm also the administrator of this meeting, so I'm going to be hitting admit every once in a while on the screen, but I'm going to do my best here to keep this conversation going. So So we're just going to get into it. I want to first start the conversation off um, with Jesse. So Jesse Heffler is the Programs and Operations Director. Is that right?
Yes.
At Garner Arts Center? Okay.
Yes, thanks, Cheryl. That's correct.
And so, all right. So, like in the opening scene of the film, right? I think it's one of the curators at MoCA is saying, we don't think something like MoCA would work in a big city because of the actual space, but also because of the approach, right? And that they're not tied down to the ideas of how things are supposed to be done, right? So, I'd love to hear your thoughts about that, but also just if you could just start us off by telling us a little bit about um, Garner Arts Center and its evolution, and it has sort of a very similar history to the space where MoCA is. And I also see Robin Rosenberg. Hi, Robin. So
Hey, Robin.
Go ahead, Jesse.
Absolutely. And thank you for the introduction, Cheryl. So yeah, I mean, it's really amazing in terms of the similarity because, history-wise, the site that we know today as the Garner Historic District or Industrial Terminal operated as a textile mill from the early 19th century through midway into the 20th century. And in those days was called Rockland Print Works. And very much like Sprague in North Adams, the mill served as the economic backbone of its hometown and village. And some of my favorite historical factoids from that era are that this mill was the first to manufacture calico in the United States. It manufactured Civil War uniforms for the Union Army, and at one time produced enough cloth to provide a dress for every woman in America. So it's just very, very cool, very, esteemed kind of history. And, to me, this rich history is it's one of collective work and innovation, and it's felt to me on the site as this really positive and inspiring energy. I like to call it good spirits that are there. But the link from 19th and 20th century manufacturing to the arts and business cultural district that we see today, where Garner Arts Center operates from, really, and toward the end of the 20th century, when our leader and president of the organization, Robin Rosenberg, joined the Garnerville Holding Company board of directors and started to bring her vision to life of making it a community for artists and creative professionals. And this started bit by bit, from her recognizing abandoned factory space and converting it into studios, to those being filled and more being filled, and this community emerges. And around this time is when it starts to really percolate in an exciting way. And in about 2001, the first arts festival is held on the site. It's an open studio weekend, and it's a project that's completely led and organized by the studio artists and the site's property management team. And it was such a success that more festivals were held, and then held annually. And it was clear from the momentum that a central organization would benefit this community as a whole. So in 2003, Garnerville Arts Project as a nonprofit is formed, originally known as GAGA for Garnerville Gallery, and today Garner Arts Center. So from there, it continues on to hold more public events and exhibitions obtains 501(c) status in 2008 and makes improvements to open a standing event and exhibition space called Gallery B. Unfortunately, to use a severe understatement, the Gallery B space is destroyed in 2011 by Hurricane Irene, and Garner, as an operation, is forced to shut down, suspending its operations for a couple of years. But when it returns, after winning a state grant in 2015, the position of program director is conceived, and it begins as a part-time position to shift the focus for Garner to use the entire historical district as a venue for immersive art experiences and performance art. And this is because Garner is operating with without its permanent gallery space. So these programs are successful at cultivating new audiences. The programs grow in size and scope, as do Garner's educational offerings, bringing in studio artists to lead public art classes, starting a program in partnership with the North Rockland Central School District known as Encounters for the Arts, which is a 4th grade field trip program to bring students to the site to work with studio artists. Then, of course, due to very generous contributions from the Ned Harris family, public art classes are held regularly in what's called the Ned Harris Education Studio, which, you know, we're still running today, of course. So, you know, it's a really inspiring story, you know, through obstacles and vision and dedication of the community. You know, we continue to develop using the site, which is the most unique resource that we have. You know, we're still developing and expanding the possibilities of what this can be through the partnerships of this unique creative community. Prime example would be collaborative programs such as Lab Fest, so AKA Live Art and Beer Fest, with Industrial Arts Brewing Company that operates on site, as well as our most recent COVID era venture, the Let There Be Light drive-through art and light show for the holiday season. So yeah, that brings us to today, I think.
Great. You know, I'm glad that and thank you for taking us through the little bit of history there of how it came to be. And I'm glad that you talked about the fact that, you know, we're not just talking about the Garner Arts Center, we're talking about a district, right? Because, you know, common to the, you know, if we're looking at a parallel with the film and with what happened at Mass MoCA, you know, we're talking about not just a space, you know, an arts institution over here and a community over here, right? So, and you know, it does sound like there's a lot that happens at Garner where there's some integration with the local community. But I'm wondering if there's anything else you'd like to share, or in terms of you know, other ways that Garner works with the local community, or if you have any insight as to what that period was like when like this arts center was being developed, and you know, did you have any challenges within the community? I mean, I'm sure there are challenges, but you know, anything that you want to share that would be of interest, and you know, maybe parallels with some of the things that we saw in the film.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you know, my understanding of the early days, you know, was that buy-in was a huge obstacle, because like we saw in North Adams, the idea of arts and culture as an economic driver, especially compared to, manufacturing, and the impact that made. And, it was just a hard sell. It was, there wasn't a proof of concept. So, as it evolved from, a business district that contained a growing community of studio artists, and started to kind of form a collective based out of that brought not only the community but the region to the site. It was making its case sort of piece by piece, and I think that in a lot of ways it was really ahead of its time, doing that. So in addition to building this reputation and bringing in so many folks to have experiences that are incredible and unique in this historic site, over time, leadership in the area, started to change, which brought on, I think, some more like-minded individuals, to see the potential in the site and see how, activity and increased traffic for these unique experiences was going to benefit the hospitality industry and tourism, and just bring more people to local businesses, and make it a destination. There are so many stories that I've heard from folks about Lab Fest, for instance, being, in many cases, from what I've heard, like, oh yeah, I experienced that, I went to that, I moved here, that kind of a thing. And and that definitely parallels what you see in North Adams, this transformative energy, this creative energy, just kind of bringing a new life to the community that multiple businesses benefit from. And it's just, yeah.
I was just going to add, Cheryl, that Jesse's right on there. One thing that I noticed in the film, that the residents of the residents of North Adams would say, I don't understand contemporary art. What is contemporary art? Even the elderly woman who was, I don't know what that back.
If you're not, I'm sorry to interrupt, Robin. If everyone could just mute themselves. Thank you. Okay, go ahead, Robin.
Yeah, they were saying, one woman said, I still don't really know what I'm looking at or understand what I'm looking at, but I like working here and I like seeing all the people enjoying it. So we started out in a situation where we had to really try to educate about how this could benefit the community and why, because there was no real understanding or recognition about, art was only a landscape painting to many people. They just, many didn't have the experience or exposure in the past, and that was something we wanted to change, which is why we have our 4th grade program, so we can start to introduce art at an early age to the residents of North Rockland, so they come to understand and appreciate what art is and what it means. But the fact is, we had to educate. We went down to the village board several times and we made presentations. We had slideshows, whole program designed around educating that arts can not only benefit you and enrich you yourselves personally, but it really is an economic driver. And this is how it's an economic driver. And we can benefit all of the businesses in this village and in this community in North Rockland, because the people who come here will obviously frequent those businesses. But it really started with a very painful education process and a repetitive one over and over to get buy-in. So it was challenging. It took a long time, that's for sure. But we got past that. And like Jesse said, we now have, we do have buy-in. We have buy-in from the village. and they're very supportive, and everything we do, they pretty much say yes to. So we're very fortunate in that regard.
That's fantastic. And, you know, I think too, like, for those of you who've had the pleasure of, you know, spending any time with Robin, she, you know, everything she's saying, like she has done all the research on what that economic impact actually looks like, numbers and everything. And it's, I mean, I can't remember any of them, but you've shared them with me and they were really impressive. And so to know that there's, you know, dollars coming into a community, it's always a good thing, right? So great. Well, thank you, Jesse and Robin. I'm sure there are going to be questions, but we're going to try to make it through the whole panel first, and then you know, please save your questions because we want to continue this discussion. And I think I'm gonna move to Magda actually next. Let's see, where are you, Magda? I want to look at this. Okay, Magda. So Magda Truchan is here representing Haverstraw Riverwide Arts. And I know you're a huge proponent and fan of Haverstraw. You and I have had great conversations about how much I don't live in Haverstraw, but I love Haverstraw and I love the food, and I love that area. And I think a lot of people don't know enough about it. They don't know that the best river view, sorry folks, in the whole county is from Haverstraw. So anyway, I'd love to talk to you about, you know, we've had some great conversations about, you know, you've said that you've seen a difference in a lot of the folks that you're seeing a lot of different folks now in the area. And you know, I'd love to have you tell us a little bit about what your mission is at Haverstraw Riverwide Arts, and maybe talk about some of the things that you've done, because I know you have something like a food crawl. You have a lot of things that really trying to bring a lot of people to the area. So if you could just tell us a little bit about it.
Okay. So we were founded in 2014 by a group of professionals, artists, community leaders, business owners, and we recognized the lack of arts programming in the village. We didn't have an arts organization at the time in 2014. And, you know, our area is urban and underserved, multicultural, and a segment of the population lacks their own transportation. How do we bring art programs to the community where they can walk to them? So we decided, let's go large. Let's host an arts festival and music festival. So we did that in Emmeline Park, which sits on the Hudson River. It's a gorgeous park. And the Village of Haverstraw Mayor and the board just rooted for us. We had some corporate sponsorship at the time, no grant at the time, but it was successful. And the following year, I had never written a grant before, but decided through Rockland, through ACOR, Arts Council of Rockland, to write a grant. And so friends helped me, board members helped me. And then your predecessor, Janie, Cheryl, edited my grant, and we were awarded a nice sizable grant. The following year, the Rockland Tourism was behind us and gave us money to market outside of the county, within the county, but also outside of the county. And in subsequent years, people did in fact come from New York City, Brooklyn, upstate New York. So we had wide reach. And we loved doing it. But then one year, this was unintentional, how we formed our food crawl in 2015 in August. Someone made disparaging remarks on Facebook about the Village of Haverstraw with racial undertones. And so a friend saw this and you know, we went to town basically against this person and said, you know, how do we dispel these terrible preconceived notions about Haverstraw? Well, why not with food? Let's do a food crawl. We had no budget, and within 6 weeks' time, that's what we did. We had no money coming from the restaurants. They weren't really sure what it was about, but we did it, and it was very successful. We had like 400 people show up. And then this thing just kept growing and growing. And then the county was behind us. You know, the village, of course, loved what we were doing. And then we added music. Subsequent years, restaurants gave us money to hire these bands. And eventually we, who doesn't love craft beer? So we shut down one street, and our local breweries, I think we had like 6 the first year. We had a craft beer garden, and then eventually we had 1,800 people show up. So it had a huge economic impact that one day. And then after these events, when we would ask the small business owners, hey, how did you do? They were so grateful because some of the customers they recognized kept coming back. So that meant so much to us. You know, you put in so much work into these events. It's just these like small gestures. That's all we want to hear is like, thank you. And so we just kept doing it. So that was the food crawl. And then one other event that we really loved, because we are an arts organization and we will continue doing the food crawl. We had an outdoor mural several years ago, helmed by Karen Bauman, who's the North Rockland School District's art coordinator. She, a few of her senior students who then went on to art school, and our organization drew this mural on the side of one of the bodegas on Broadway. And that was a wonderful project because people would stop by, just people who lived in the downtown wondering, what the heck is this? And just loved it and sat there and questioned us, and they were like so grateful. And but really what was the most heartwarming thing, there's a senior daycare center in the downtown called Centro de Amigos, and this woman women-owned day center saw what we were doing and said, hey, you know, we have some seniors, they could really benefit from helping you guys. So they did. And I remember this one woman, she didn't say a peep. I didn't know if she had like onset dementia or whatever. Didn't say anything to anyone, but yet stood there all day painting, like just remembered how to paint. And it was just like the most remarkable, heartwarming thing. And these are the kinds of things that arts organizations bring into a community, you know, and that's why we want to keep continuing doing these things, because it really brings together people and it helps with economic development, and it just makes you feel good. And it feels good, you know, connecting with people you may not meet otherwise. So we're going to keep going.
Amazing. I didn't know about a lot of the things that you talked about.
Oh, I can go on and on.
Yeah.
Give me another hour.
I'm glad that you, you know, mentioned a lot of the interactions and collaborations with the small business owners and other members within the community, because, you know, this was something that some of us, you know, the panelists, we were all chatting before we went live, and we were talking about the fact that, you know, certainly, you know, an issue that we know can't be skirted over, even though it's not really the focus of the film, but that we felt, you know, is something that is important and, you know, has to be addressed in some way, maybe not at length this evening, is the fact that, you know, we're talking about what, you know, when you come into a community and you're doing economic development always has, you know, it's sort of loaded, right? I mean, it's, I think we're probably preaching to the choir, you know, in this meeting, and with understanding how that can be transformative and positive in a community. But, certainly there's always the question of, well, pre-economic development, what about the people that were there, and are they still there? And what do they think? And have they been pushed out? So it's really nice to hear about how the whole community seems to be coming together, and how art is like, is sort of like the catalyst to do that. So again, I know this is a much larger issue, but I appreciate you sharing. So thank you. And if you have any questions for Magda, hold on to them, because we are going to get there. All right, so let's just keep moving right. Oops, I accidentally muted myself. Sorry. So we're going to move over to Rachel Whitlow, who is, I believe, are you the executive director? Is that correct, Rachel?
That is correct.
Okay, so Rachel is the new-ish, right, executive director of the
Yes.
Haverstraw Brick Museum. So this is, sort of a little bit of a different perspective from what we were talking about with Magda, but, obviously some common themes. But, I guess what's, sort of a tied in with what's happening at Garner, and some commonalities with Garner is that your organization sort of rooted in the history of the place, right? So can you tell us a little bit about the museum and sort of its role in the community?
Sure. So like Garner, and also like in the documentary that we mostly watched, I'm hoping, the history of Haverstraw is really rooted in the brick manufacturing, brick building industry. And at one point, this was really the economic driver of the area, as well as the Hudson River in general. And what is interesting, and for me has been a path of discovery, is understanding just how far back those roots go. So the very first area that was bought goes back to the 1700s. 1757 is when the very first piece of land was built, which is what is Haverstraw today. And it goes all the way to the present time. And our museum was founded by the descendant 5 times over of the person who bought that property in 1757. So you have a direct, and that is the Denoyles family. So you have a direct piece of American history there
can save you
that
tons of hands-on preparation time, so you can get to the good stuff of cooking and eating faster.
I'm gonna pause for a second
The versatile kitchen appliance
while
that
we
can
wait
be
for.
chop, slice, shred, grind, and
Oh,
puree.
Noreen, can you mute yourself?
As the market has a wide range of food processors, you can easily be confused about which one to pick for. So in today's video, we are going to show
So
you
I'm listening to someone else's
perfect slicing and chopping.
radio. Okay. So where were we? In any case, so it's a very powerful story about immigration and the role of immigration, and really represents in a wonderful way the stories of how New York State was settled and how the building of New York happened through the eyes and history of the brick making industry. So we had 41 brickyards altogether, but the nature of the brickyards was that it was very easy to create your own business. So at one point we had 115 brick brands that were all part of this immigration movement. And so our role and how we're engaging in the arts going towards the future is, how do we use the events of historical note, from the museum's archives, and how do we juxtapose that with the work of the artists whose medium and subject matter strive to examine in a reflective and critical way historical, social, and economic structures within our society today. And how do we sort of make a line from the history that we're rooted in to telling those stories of immigration in Haverstraw and bringing those stories alive. And we have many examples, and as we go through the year, you'll probably be seeing some of them announced on our website. But we feel that from an art perspective and how we're bringing the arts to the museum is understanding the cultural and traditional roots and how that ties in with architecture and medium. So a perfect example of this is one of the artists who's now at Garner, James Tyler, and he is a native of Haverstraw, but his work brings together all three of these aspects of community. So this is something that we're going to be working on going forward, and we're very excited about bringing these stories to life and talking about how they relate to subjects today and sit within the social economic world today.
Great.
Do you have any?
Yeah, and who comes to the museum? I mean, I don't know about these days, but is it like, do you have, tell us like who comes to the museum?
So the strategy has been very much a very local community has been coming to the museum and descendants of the brickyards who come to the museum. But as we've kind of restructured and started to bring a more of a strategic point of view to how we're bringing in people, we've gone online. We're a very small space, and we're trying to bring the archives alive. And as we brought them alive, we're actually getting interest from all over the world. So in the past couple months, we've had interest from England, where some of the inventions of Haverstraw were shipped overseas, like the Vervallen machine. And so it's the automatic brick making machine. And so it's become very interesting to see sort of the scope and the breadth that just having the website and the social media available to people, where before no one could see any of that information. So I think as we grow, we're going to be seeing more and more people come to the museum with that interest in mind.
It's great. And it's exciting to know that it's such a an avenue for those stories to be told, going back to, 200 years or so, 300 years. Amazing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Great. Okay. Well, thank you so much, Rachel. And again, whoops, I keep accidentally muting myself. Hold your questions for Rachel, because we want to also make sure we hear from Elliott. So Elliott Forrest, the executive and artistic director, right, of ArtsRock. And he has a much longer, very impressive resume, but so, Elliott, we wanted to have Elliott talk to us a little bit about sort of we're going to move a little bit from the focus of Haverstraw to the county, because I know, you in particular, Elliott, have, a lot you can tell us about the overall landscape and sort of some of your observations, having been in this world and, not just in Rockland, but everywhere. But so tell us what your thoughts are about how you've seen, maybe over the past decade or 10 to 15 years since ArtsRock has been around. Have you seen any kind of changes or evolution And also, what are the great opportunities here in Rockland that maybe are untapped or just developing? That was a lot of questions.
That was a
Sorry.
lot of questions. But first of all, thank you for inviting me. This is great. I also want to applaud Matthew and Rivertown Film. I love the film. I think the work that they're doing is great. And I think you've been a real asset to the Arts Council. Cheryl, thank you for that. I think a lot of people know our organization because I look into this group of people that are here right now, and many of you have been to our shows. We've been around for 12 years as a nonprofit. We've put on 100 shows in those 12 years at a variety of venues all around the county. Our mission is simple, is to present professional performing arts in and around Rockland County. We've partnered with Garnerville. We produced a concert there. We've partnered with Rivertown and worked with them a great deal. Tiffany is on this call this evening from Elmwood Playhouse. I think all told, we've worked with 30 other nonprofits in Rockland County, putting on these professional shows and then partnering with different people. I think that one of the things that attracted me personally to this community to move here was the fact that it has such a great history of the arts. It's people know Helen Hayes, Lotta Lania and Kurt Weill lived here. I remember hearing one of my favorite stories that Lotta Lania lived in Rockland County, and she and her husband Kurt Weill would have dinner parties, and she hated to do the dishes. So after the dinner party, she would just go throw the dishes in some creek in Rockland County. And I thought, that's where I want to live. That sounds like fun to me. And then this next generation, even after that, with Jonathan Demme and Bill Murray, and then the generation that's here now. I look on this call. There are many artists that are on this call, like Miles and Lisa Lavart and many people here. So it's a very artistic community. And I think that's going to continue to grow. And that's inherent in the fact that we're 45 minutes from Times Square, and that this is a great place to be. So how do you satisfy the needs of artists as well as the community that they're not artists, but they live in our community as well, and provide for them from an artistic standpoint? I mean, we started to look at that and realize that not everybody really, frankly, can afford to drive into Manhattan. Not everyone can afford to go to the Met. So if I bring James Galway, as we've done twice, into Nyack, I mean, this is a world-class artist that, our ticket prices are like $25 or $35. You'd be paying 3 times that at Carnegie Hall. And the parking is so much easier, except in Nyack. We've attempted to try to keep the level really high and bring really great shows here. I will say that I think initially when we started 12 years ago, there was a lot of amateur productions of different various kinds of art forms, and that we really pegged professional performing arts. I think that's changed. I think that has increased within our community. I think there's a lot of great professional performing arts within our community. And I think that will continue to grow once we get past this pandemic. I loved this film. I loved seeing the economic development and what it did for a community, because as Robin was saying earlier, when you go to communities and go, yeah, I hope you enjoy and you do your little shows. And it's like, yeah, I do my little shows, but 500 people after my little show go into a bar or restaurant before or after. I know the economic development of the work of all of these artists, and that people don't just go into a museum or see a show or go to Garner, that they also shop there and they eat there and they drink there. Love the Industrial Arts Brewery. That's a really great thing. So I think the film is a really great example of what the arts can do for a community and to a community and with a community, and that a community can grow with the arts along with it.
Great. Okay. And I love, and I think a lot of, all of our panelists actually have addressed this question of access, right? So making the arts accessible, and doing it in such a way that it actually is desirable also, right? So there's not this sort of, I think sometimes there's this feeling that the arts is for somebody else, or a certain type of art is for somebody else. And I feel like what I've been hearing from all of the panelists here is that the opposite, right? That it's for everybody, and all of you are making that, you know, a reality here in Rockland. So thank you for that.
If I could, Cheryl, one of the things that we've
Please.
tried to do too is our family programming over the last several years with the help of Jeffrey Friedberg is really focused on performances for and about those on the spectrum and those with special needs. And we just found that that was an area that was so underserved. You know, the first couple of shows we did, you know, and look, a lot of people know this. I'm on the radio on WQXR. I come from a world in which you go and sit at the Met or an orchestra and you just move wrong, people yell at you. So the idea that you would, you know, have a concert where literally the audience is completely welcome, that whatever happens, happens. That if you've got a family or member that's special needs or on the spectrum, and, you know, people, the first time we did it, people were jumping around and were making all kinds of noise, and we called it joyous. The performers called it joyous. It was part of the experience. So it's that kind of welcoming, that kind of sort of like, you know, changing thinking to not just, you know, sit on your hands and, you know, be quiet and observe something, but to let whatever happen in certain circumstances that, you know, we've tried to explore, particularly with our family programming.
Amazing. So I guess another question for you, Elliott. What's next, do you think, for Rockland County in terms of the arts? Like, where do you see a great potential that where we could develop, or, and, you know, maybe I could open this to all of the panelists, if there's, you have any thoughts about that. Where do you see us going next, and how can we, you know, what needs to happen to bring us to that next level, if there is a next level in terms of the arts here in Rockland?
Well, my 2 cents worth of just about that in general, about literally right this minute, is that I went to our board, you know, 6 months ago, and I said, we're in the live performing arts business. Should we be doing virtual programming? Should we be in the television business and providing online content? It's not what we had done. And the board was unanimous about doing it. And when I talked to my colleagues at Carnegie Hall and Lincoln Center and the New York Philharmonic, everyone believes that this is going to be going on for a lot longer. And I don't mean the pandemic necessarily. I just mean that everyone's set up now to do television and video within their places. So I think we will go back, and we will be, you know, at first obviously socially distant. The performing arts specifically was the first to stop and will be the last to continue. But I believe that when we go back, people will still be watching on their screens, and I think that is going to continue for a long time to come. And I think people, I think that's going to happen. I'm going to look around this audience right now and all these little boxes right now, and I'm getting a lot of people are going, I don't want to be elbow to elbow. I got my vaccine, but I'm still not going to be elbow to elbow to somebody else for a while. And I think that's going to continue.
Yeah, I mean, I wonder too if, I mean, you know, being virtual certainly gave us a different level of access, right? There, like, I know for me personally, there are things that I've accessed that I may not have before because they were.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Yeah. So, I'm sorry, who said that? Oh,
Was that Jesse?
Oh,
Yeah.
that was yeah, I was just saying, I remember. Yeah, well, you know, and I see, I remember toward the beginning of the pandemic, there was this term some people use called virtual spring. And I think that, you know, it's hard to say exactly where we're going. I do agree with you, Elliott, that now that this has opened up, it will continue to be an option for people. But I'm excited to see how this develops, especially in conjunction with the return of, you know, in-person programs. It's a real opportunity for creativity and innovation, and that opportunity to be creative about how audiences are brought together, what an audience is, what a space is, and all that, you know, has been, you know, one of the most exciting aspects of this era. And you know, I'm optimistic for some, you know, really interesting developments there.
I'd like to add to this. One of the things that we've been trying to do and focus on, because we worked with a lot of school children before the pandemic, and now we're trying to bring them online, is we're trying to combine the activities that we're doing online as a springboard to outdoor activities or walking tours, where you start to see the world in a new way. And I think it's a way to bring families together around a topic. And one of the things that I think is very special about the Haverstraw area in general is that it's almost like a small museum. I mean, if you walk around Haverstraw, you can see the brick buildings, you can see the architecture, you can see when you go to Garner Arts, you can see the arts communities. And we're trying to bring both the virtual and the activities together so that as a student is learning about bricks, they're actually going out and seeing the bricks and learning about the brick bonds. And we're trying to bring those things together. And I think from an artistic point of view, there's a lot of opportunity there to grow that space.
Great.
No, I just wanted to add that we may see sooner than we think the return to some live programming, because that's what's being discussed now at the state level, to allow live gathering, live performance for arts organizations up to 150 people, provided they get the rapid tests that are negative, and you have to get it within a certain time or something like that. So the details I'm not aware of, but I know broad brush that they're looking to open live arts organization performances and the like for 150 people in March. So that's pretty soon.
And you have spaces, and you have spaces outdoors, which I think will be first, which is great.
Right.
I loved all your
nice
outdoor
weather
events. Yeah.
Thanks. Yeah, I mean, and this summer our outdoor shorts, This Is Now, which was wildly successful, but we were limited to 50 people at that time, even outdoors. So we had to turn people away, which was very disappointing because it was great. But there is some light on the horizon. So it's not the same. I don't think we're going to be able to go to theaters like we did, shoulder to shoulder, as Elliott was saying, but there's a little bit of glimmer of light coming through the door here. So that's a good thing.
Exciting. It's been so long.
I don't know what to do with it.
Well, at this point, let's, I of course want to make sure that if there are burning questions with the rest of the folks that are here with us, that we open up the discussion. Feel free to throw a question in the chat or just unmute yourself, and we're all here. So I don't know, anybody have any questions or for any of our panelists, or just want to make a general comment? Or
I do.
It's open.
I do, Linda Hubbard. And I used to be in Beacon, Riverwinds Gallery, Beacon Arts, Art Along the Hudson. I chaired it for 10 years. So I love having the D Art Museum and in Beacon, and that clearly helped us. But I've moved to rural little communities in Connecticut. And so totally different from what a lot of you are experiencing and talking about. But I have gotten great ideas tonight for even my little rural communities that I'm now in. So I just want to thank you for this panel and all your great ideas and what you're talking about. So I just want to thank you.
Thank you, Linda. Great. All right.
Cheryl?
Go ahead, Richard.
I just want to make a comment. I'm involved with both River Arts and the Brick Museum. And, as Magda was saying, the purpose was to reach out to the community and and to use the arts there. But on the side of the museum, our strategy is to also, because people say, well, why would I want to go to a brick museum? So, you know, there's topics connected to that industry, whether it was climate problems, climate change. We had the Great Landslide of 1906. And why did we have the Great Landslide? Because there was greed. They were undermining the land. And even though they were told to stop, they didn't. And we experience that greed in our society today. The other thing is systemic racism. You know, even though the industry was open to immigrants and migration of ex-slaves coming up from the South, there still was racism there. And we feel by talking about that, we can come together and use the arts to deal with those subjects in today's world. It's just a comment, and just that's the idea. That's one of the ideas that the museum is also going to use, besides preservation, besides memories. You know, I know people like to talk about their relatives, but there's a much bigger story there. And it's about our world, and we're experiencing those issues today.
Absolutely. And you know, I love that you brought up some of those issues, Richard, because I feel like that's a whole, like, I would love to spend another hour talking about just that, right? Like I'm not an artist. And you know, people ask me like, so why do you do this? I'm like, because well, my experience with the arts has always been that you know, for me, it's always raised more questions than it's answered for me. And I like that I need that discomfort in my life to make sure that I'm a part of this world, you know? And I just think, you know, art has that ability to make us force us to think about these things. It's an opportunity. So anyway, sorry. Were there any other, I could go on. I'm sure we all could, but I'd love to hear from other folks. Hey, Katie.
Hi. Wow, what a great panel and discussion. Thank you, everyone. And really great to meet you, Magda, and Rachel, and see Cheryl again. Hi. And so many other faces. Mark. So some of you may not know that I'm Katie Elovich, and I ran a small community arts, multi-arts interactive space on Main Street in Nyack for 2 years, from 2017 to 2019. It was a truly transformative project in many ways for the people that walked through the doors and became a part of it. And it was built by the people that were able to, again, that word access the space, discover it, stumble upon it, if you will. And for that very reason, it was extraordinarily diverse, many different generations, races, genders, a lot of youth involvement, and of course, a lot of artistic energy and artistic development from that experience. And it really sort of was an incubator space. And I was reflecting as I was listening to, again, through you voices, nice to meet you, Jesse, the history of Garner. A lot of it I already knew to some degree, but it's always nice to hear it comprehensively, of course, now through the lens of this insane time we're living in. And for me personally, I just wanted to add my little bit, which was that Garner was for me very much that kind of incubator space where I was, you know, brought in. I visited artist studios. I stumbled upon it. I discovered it wasn't walkable, which is a little tricky. But once I found myself there, found my way there, I kept returning and eventually got my own artist studio and was also asked to be an educator for that incredible 4th grade program. And all of these over a period of a few years were very transformative for me as an artist, as a community member, and ultimately then as someone who became a leader in the arts community. And I think those stories are important too. And by the way, just such, I teach storytelling workshops, and I just loved all the stories that everyone contributed here tonight. So important. And that's really what the arts are doing, and all these different organizations, whether, you know, large scale exhibits or smaller spaces. Linda, I loved your story about being in rural Connecticut and wanting to take these ideas and create your own, you know, take that inspiration and create your own way to make a difference in your community. And I feel like my experiences at Garner and all of these other spaces that we're talking about, Elliott's programs, the family program is so important, and how that we won't know over time, we will see how that impacts the artists themselves, what they then continue to do into the community, and also the community members themselves, how they've been affected. And I think it might be interesting to see somehow, I don't know who it's going to be, how do we get those stories? I know Bill Batson's been doing oral storytelling, and the Nyack Library's been doing an oral storytelling project, but there's so many stories to tell, and they're not necessarily from artists. It's just like what we've been hearing tonight, just the stories, the things we've been hearing that Magda was relaying from the people that are directly impacted. So fascinating to me. Anyway, I could go on and on too, Cheryl. So thank you for listening. So maybe that gives a jumping off point to somebody else to share.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. Thank you so much, Katie. And I'm just going to pause for a second because it's 8:36 and I know people have things to do, but I'm just going to say that I can, you know, I'm happy to stay on for a few more minutes. I know there's some other questions. So if you have to go, certainly feel free to do so. But, you know, I'm happy to keep this open for a few more questions. So I just wanted to say that. And I do see that Ryan, you have a question or a comment?
Hi, yes. I joined a little late, I apologize, but I was just curious to hear a little bit more from Garner or the Brick Museum or some of the organizations about how they're engaging the growing Hispanic population in the community. And just, you know, curious as to how that's happening and whether there's a willingness on, you know, that population to engage.
Great question.
I got a lot to say about that. Okay, so our trustees in the village are, the majority are Hispanic, and they work with us in all things that we do. They're very supportive. So every event we do is whatever literature, flyers, whatever, everything's written in Spanish and English. All of these flyers and whatnot also go to our schools, to every kid who then hands it to their parents. So we want to reach every age group. And then also we post things within the downtown. You know, it's just such a small walkable downtown. Every storefront and whatnot, and through a word of mouth also gets this literature. We didn't do it this year, but a few times we posted in El Sol, which is a large, you know, newspaper for the Latino population. And trying to think, Richard, where else? That's one way we do it. So, yeah, and on the radio. Also.
That's great, Magda. Thank you.
Yeah.
That's super helpful to
It
hear.
was
Yeah,
very,
I mean,
especially through the schools. That's just like, it's so easy to do that. When I was speaking, I don't know if you heard me before, Karen Bauman, the arts coordinator, I give her the cards and she graciously, you know, disseminates to 8,000 students. She does this every year for us. It's like, thank God we have these great volunteers, you know? It really
I mean, I guess I'm thinking also like, you know, we work in I'm a developer. So we work in a lot of communities, Hispanic communities, and there's just so much craftsmanship and artistic, you know, inspiration that comes from, you know, a lot of these countries, especially Central American countries that are, you know, growing populations. And, you know, how do you engage them and get them to kind of bring their skill sets to the table and show their wares and, you know, their artistic abilities to be part of it, not just from an attendance standpoint, right, but from a participation standpoint. But it sounds like you're hitting a lot of the hot buttons of how to do the outreach.
I do want to say one thing before COVID. I mean, we were headed in that direction. There's never been a oh my God, Richard, help me. I'm having a brain freeze. What was the event?
What,
During Day of the Dead.
Yes.
Dia de los Muertos, right? That would have been a first in the village. And we were going to do just that, reach out through social media and through various other organizations outside of the county to bring in Hispanic artists, but then no go, COVID. And so
it was an opportunity for tomorrow. So
for tomorrow,
Yeah.
exactly.
Ryan, one of the things that I have noticed is that it's hard to get trust from those communities.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
And you have to be consistent. You have to, you know, keep that, and then eventually the trust comes, but it's extremely hard.
Listen, I can't tell you how many soccer games I've gone to try to just, you know, be there and be present and not pretend like I understand, you know, their community, but at least, you know, observe. We typically bring on like a local person, obviously Hispanic speaking, that kind of can bridge the gap in some instances. But yeah, earning that trust is such a huge piece of the equation. It's hard enough to do it with, you know, U.S. citizens, right? Let alone folks that are kind of there, you know, from another place, right?
One of the things that we've been doing with the museum as part of our new strategy is trying to tell everyone's story and relate that to events or cultural happenings that are going on within that community. So, for example, for the month of Cinco de Mayo, we're actually telling the story of one of the brickyard owners who was of Hispanic origin. We unearthed this information and we feel that it's an extraordinary story to tell. So we're trying to bring both the community and the story together. And I think that this is gonna open things up and bring more people into the museum. But we're making a conscious effort to do that across the board with all the communities that have been, you know, part of the immigration story.
You know, years ago, we held a Latin festival, and the festival itself was wonderful. The art exhibitions, the music, wonderful. But we didn't get the Latino community to the extent that we had hoped. So that's another one of the reasons we started to develop our fourth grade program, because as Richard said, it's so hard to build trust in the adult community. Let's start with the kids. And, you know, every year, every fourth grader, and then we were going to start an eighth grade program, which again, because of COVID got messed up, but then there was going to be, they would come in fourth grade and they'd come in eighth grade. And that's how we were going to work to build trust. And actually Jesse was working with Professor Garcia from North Rockland High School, who's on our Garner Arts Center board, and we were going to put together another Latin festival now that we've had some experience with our fourth grade program, because, you know, the fourth grade program is also, the parents know the kids are going, right? So it's building trust at multiple levels. So we've got to try it again this year, and then COVID happened. But I think in our own ways, we're all very cognizant of the communities in which we live, and we want to celebrate the communities in which we live and work and play. And so we want to we want to make sure that we're all communicating and on the same page to the extent we can be, and bring them into the fold.
That's awesome. That's great. Yeah, I'm just, I don't want to, I could go on for hours, but what was the relevance of fourth grade, just out of curiosity, as out of all the grades?
Actually, this high school superintendent, we were thinking about fifth graders. She decided fourth graders was the right age because they were old enough to be, they were mature enough to be able to come and sit and listen and digest the information. But they weren't into that social situation yet where something might not be cool. So she decided that fourth grade was like, that was the group. So, we followed her recommendation in that regard. And it's been
She should tell my third grader to stop calling me not cool. So, yeah. Anyway, thank you so much.
Can I just put one more thing out there for you, Ryan? And that is that ArtsRock partnered recently with the Public Theater and their Under the Radar Festival. And it really came out of my work at New York Public Radio, where we partnered with the Public Theater to create Shakespeare in the Park on the radio. And in a couple of weeks, if you listen to WNYC and WQXR, you're going to hear a lot about this. But we're about to announce Romeo y Julieta. It will be a free radio drama in which the Public Theater and New York Public Radio will be releasing a bilingual Romeo and Juliet. And it should be understandable, I think, by almost anybody. So it'll be a mix of languages. And we think it's a real great introduction, both in English and Spanish, for this great work of Shakespeare.
That's an amazing idea. Thank you. Appreciate that.
There's a great question here, if I can jump in, from Alan. I'm just going to read it. When we say we want to transform community, how do we define all the elements of community? How do we measure the economic impact the arts already have so the arts can be given further support? So there's kind of two big questions in there. Anyone want to take a stab at that?
I can talk about the last part in terms of if he's talking about the economic impact. Is that what the question is, Cheryl?
Yes, that was one of the questions.
The economic impact. So Cheryl, that's what you alluded to earlier with the numbers. There's something called the Arts and Economic Prosperity Calculator. And you can plug in certain numbers about your population and your revenue if you're an arts center, and it will deliver the economic impact on local level, state level, et cetera. So we're really able to measure using that calculator. And that's what we use for our grants. And it's you'll see, we've seen how impactful it is. I mean, sometimes I look at the numbers and I'm like, wow, yeah, that's just amazing. That's awesome. And that really helps us educate our those who are in office, our political leaders, to understand the importance of the arts. So
can I add something to that? We have so many amazing art organizations in what is considered the smallest county in New York State. Has anyone ever collectively gone to the county and said, hey, we need to celebrate art as a county, where we would expose all of these different groups over a period of time, maybe it's a month, which would create economic tourism and actually shine a light on each one of the organizations that are represented here this evening, and then some, to a much broader audience. I'm wondering if that's ever been considered and brought up to the attention of the county leaders.
Well, certainly, I think in the last couple of years, they have actually been more aggressive in giving tourism money to a lot of us and a lot of the arts organizations, because they realize the economic impact. I think, this is not huge money, but I think it's been generous and at least a nod to the idea that they know that we bring people into the county. You heard stories before about people going to Garner. We had a Mardi Gras concert with a really great band at the Nyack Center, and there was a couple I didn't recognize. And it's like, we read about it. We live in Brooklyn. We came here. We booked a hotel. We had restaurants. We came to this concert. It's like that was the prototype of economic development.
I guess what I was saying, Elliot, is more, and I agree with you, and we do the same thing at Rivertown, and Garner does the same thing with their festival. But I'm just wondering if there's a way that all of the arts organizations could come together and say, hey, this month we celebrate art in Rockland County, and Rivertown does something, and Garner does something, and ROCA does something, and so on and so on.
We have talked about it actually, Suzanne. It's something that Lucy Rezaposky, who used to head up tourism, she initiated that, and she kind of challenged us to work together to come up with something like that. And we started Hopper House and Garner and ROCA and a few others. We were just going to be like a seed group, and then we were going to. There was so much work involved that it was hard for us to pull it all together and to come up with something that made sense. That it wasn't just one organization's doing this and another organization's doing that. We were trying to do something that would really have an impact, and people from throughout the region, people from Brooklyn would say, oh yeah, this is a reason to come up to Rockland. We were talking about doing it for a month, so there'd be different emphases on different weekends. I'm not sure why it didn't happen. I think like I said, it was just a lot of work, and we all struggle to just keep our own.
No, I agree with you. It is a lot of. You need somebody on the county level to sort of spearhead it, organize it, and then each individual group would come up with whatever to work within the theme. But you do need somebody to oversee the whole gorilla. I mean, it's huge. I get that.
Yeah.
But we're a small county and we have the resources. I mean, that we have the artistic muscle, I guess is the best way to put it.
I talked about this with Cheryl that post-pandemic, I'm not sure about a month, but I would produce an evening, a one night in which, dozens of arts organizations were represented in a single concert. That would be manageable, and something that I've talked to Cheryl about that I would be happy to do. And we can all, I just can't wait. As much as I think the video thing will continue, I can't wait to be on stage and look at a live audience and look at real people in the same room and entertain people and have that happen. So the idea that we could all come together with a whole bunch of organizations in an evening, I would do that in a heartbeat.
Terms of increasing the artistic visibility in the community with the realty community, is there any way that the artistic organizations work with the realtors so that Rockland is known as an artist destination?
I'll just say, after running Riverspace for 4 years as a volunteer, they'd have to give you the space. They'd have to go, here's the space for $1. Now raise all the money to run the programming.
I mean, from a residential standpoint, because I think a part of what makes this community so attractive to people is its artistic muscle, but I don't think it's as well known outside of the area,
or even in the real,
or even within the real estate community.
Oh, and I'm in real estate. That's a very interesting concept. That's a very interesting idea. No, it's not being done. It's very interesting.
Yeah. In Brooklyn, the people buy real estate by following the artists. We'd have a lot more Brooklynites here spending money on our property if they understood that.
We have had people move to North Rockland because of Garner. I mean, people have said to us, I'm here because of the fact that you have all these events at Garner. And we've had real estate agents use in their advertising, half a mile from Garner. So some of them are picking it up. I don't think that all of them recognize the importance and impact that the arts can have on real estate, but a lot of them do.
Is there a Rockland Realty organization that could be messaged in a more universal way, maybe through ACOR?
That's a great idea, Alan. There actually is. So I can't remember what it's called, but there is. So I could figure that out and talk to Cheryl about it.
It's a really, really good idea. Thank you.
Yeah.
And some of the leaders in that area, Russ Woolley at Wright Brothers, I think they'll be very receptive to that.
Yeah.
Can I just say Deborah Grossmark has been trying to ask a question for a while.
Go
Are you
ahead,
there,
Deborah.
Deborah?
Deborah, you have to unmute yourself though.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
So what I was asking is so many of these subjects are important, and we've talked about history. I grew up in Haverstraw. I moved around. I moved to the city. I moved back. What are I understand ArtsRock and the things you've been doing and Miles and people who can document you, but I guess my question, because I photograph live entertainment or unit stills and document, and that's how I teach my students for 19 years. And I just opened a studio at Garner last year. I mean, granted, it never quite opened because of COVID, but I'm still there. And so my question is, how is everybody documenting all of this amazing work and festivals and the things that they're growing or wanting to expand in? How are you all, just so I get a grasp, as well as for my students, how are you documenting this work so it stays and is there? How what are you doing, if there is an answer?
I'll jump in and say that we've completely changed everything we do because of COVID. We're shooting shows on 7 cameras. We just did a live concert with the great pianist Simona Dinnerstein with 5 cameras. The stuff that we're doing now is living on our site. I put this in the chat. We're coming up. I'll be doing a conversation with the actor and comedian Eddie Izzard. It'll be live, and then that'll live on our site. All of a sudden, as I said earlier, we're in the TV business, and I never saw that coming. And so a lot of our content will be there. Again, I can't wait to do live shows that are ethereal. They come and go. You weren't there, you missed it. But a lot of our stuff will live online.
Great.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, documenting live events has definitely been a part of our normal operations since I've been at Garner. But as Elliott was saying, virtual events tend to create this body of work that can be revisited throughout. And, we've certainly built quite a bit of that for ourselves as well, from different events that we've put online through the pandemic and held on to that way.
Excellent. All right. Oh, Matthew.
Yeah, I'll speak up at this point. This whole question of of community development and using the arts and how that happens in Rockland County, that we started to move into is really the genesis of this discussion tonight and the Film Museum Town. And one of the quotes I remember from a meeting at the county legislature when we were battling for money for nonprofits was Annie Paul, a legislator named Annie Paul, said, "The arts build strong communities, and strong communities build strong governments." And that's really what that's one of the goals here. That's the outward goal. The inward goal for the arts is self-realization and seeing something and realizing, oh, I just learned something about myself that I never knew before. So there's the outward and the inward. But when we're talking about using the arts to develop and the role of county government, and let's have a countywide event, the only reason that any of that ever makes sense is if it's ongoing. There's nothing, why go through the huge amount of work and spend the huge amount of money to do something for a month? It's got to be an ongoing project. We're part of a mosaic that builds culture, that builds our communities. And that when people try to do that from the top down and say, let's have a festival, let's raise $100,000 and have a festival, then who are these people and who are these sponsors? It's when it comes from below through the interaction of groups like ours and the kinds of outreach that were described by Jesse and Magda and Rachel tonight, going out into the communities and reaching kids and their parents and being part of communities that makes us strong and makes us, a vibrant reality in the future. But the only way that we can be a real political force is by being together, and that requires coordination and leadership. And to me, that's always what the point of the Arts Council of Rockland has been, that they are not the government. They are from our communities. Yes, they're supported by the county, and that's ideal, that someone that's in the middle of all of this. Cheryl can't do it on her own. She needs more support from the government. We do need more money for the Arts Council of Rockland. They're doing tremendous work in the last few years, and they need more support so that they can keep doing, just on a small level, things like this tonight, and on a larger level, yes, being a coordinator of arts in Rockland County in the future, and great things that can happen here. But if it comes from the top, if someone says, let's put on a food festival in New City, and we're all going to support this, and we've got this bank is going to be the sponsor, and it's like, it really should, those don't feel right to me. It's when it comes from the community that it really has an impact, and it can really last and grow. And so hats off to Cheryl, and I hope that we can do more of these things, and the Arts Council of Rockland can grow in the future.
Well, thank you, Matthew. For the kind words, but the overall sentiment, completely agree. I think it's all about people coming together, and this conversation is, again, I feel like just scratches the surface of the many different directions we could take it. And I feel like I would love to continue this conversation in another form, and maybe there's a part 2 to this, or maybe this is a series, I don't know. But just, if I may, the thing that I really love, and maybe this is a good place for us to end, it's almost 9 o'clock, but this is what I love about my job. Having this kind of conversation, and many of us in the arts organizations do have, versions of these conversations on a regular basis. And it's really nice to be able to be having this with many more people. So, I'll just say at this point, thank you, Matthew, for bringing the idea forward and for making the film available, so that we could, sort of as the catalyst for this great conversation. And of course, thank you to the organizations that were on the panel tonight. So thanks to Jesse and Robin and Rachel, Richard, Magda. It was, and of course, Elliott. Great conversation. I feel like we could have spent 2 hours on each of your organizations and the incredible work that you do, and the interesting perspectives that you brought to the conversation. So again, I feel like we just scratched the surface, and I hope that we can do more of this. This isn't really normally the kinds of things that we do, but like you said, Matthew, this is what we should be doing. So thank you for bringing the idea forward. So I guess with that, unless there's any burning closing remarks, just thank you all for spending the evening together, and thank you for your support of the arts, and please continue to support us all. And just have a great night.
Thank you, Cheryl.
Thank you all so much. Good to see you.
Thank you so much, Cheryl. Good night. Thank you, Matthew.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ready to go?
Yep.